I don't like editing with AI, and I will tell you why in this video. There are okay ways to do it, and there are a few methods and tools that I do actually recommend for editing with AI. But on the whole, I think it's a little bit messy. And so let's get into that. Now, the reason I don't like editing with AI is because AI, because of the nature of what it is often just telling you what it thinks you want to hear based on the feedback you give it. And which means that you have to get extremely specific in order to get the feedback you want. And if you could do that, then you wouldn't really need it as an editor anyway. I'll show you a quick example of what I mean by this. So if we go here to, this is a book I was writing with AI, just take a section here, plug it into ChatGPT using GPT-4 and say, please critique the following, which is a very generic, broad overview of what we need. And then I'll just put that in here. It starts to give us a response, and then we start to get into the critique. So it says things like, you do an excellent job establishing the setting of Bright Soul Academy in the world of Emnreach. The mention of Emberfan steak and ribs, the ancient tapestries, and the high ceilings of the mess hall all contribute to a vivid, fantastical atmosphere. Character emotion. Lyra's emotional state, nervous and grappling with existential doubt, is clearly conveyed through her dialogue. The conversation between Lyra and Alara sounds natural and serves multiple functions. It reveals character traits, presents the plot dilemma, and exposes backstory. So here's an interesting thing. I tested this on this exact same piece of material before I rolled the camera for this particular video, and it said the exact opposite about the dialogue. So what is going on is that sometimes it just sort of looks at a piece and says, what are some things that from a probability standpoint would make sense to say here? Now, that isn't to say that they get everything wrong. It just means, ChatGPT is working from a point of probability. It's thinking, what is the likely thing to say, rather than what is some actual genuine critical advice that we could put here. Now, not everything is bad here. It does get some things right, particularly when it comes to things like spelling and grammar. So it caught us typo here. There are some minor issues such as prestigious should be prestigious and things like that. And sometimes it'll give you things that when you think about it, like, actually, yeah, that would work. Like this ethical depth section here says, if Lyra is doubting the ethics of her field, that opens up a potentially fascinating dimension. However, the conversation with Alara brushes past it quickly. Delving deeper into the ethical dilemma could add rich layers to the story and its characters. Yes, I agree that would be the case, but really it's a lot of the good comments like this one are often just kind of random and not necessarily something that the AI is able to definitively say, yes, this is something that could be improved. A lot of times it's just sort of making stuff up. And the more you work with it, the more you'll start to see that happening, which is why this is kind of a difficult thing for me to really put my on, because I've just working with the AI over time, I've just kind of gotten this sense for how it works. And just asking it to critique your writing in this way is not going to be good. Now, if there are specific things that you are looking for, that's a different story. And I will refer you in the description below to a video made by Future Fiction Academy, where they go into some more advanced ways to edit. And I'll give you just a brief kind of preview of what they did there, but it's kind of a cool method. But at the same time, I feel like it's a little overcomplicated. And the thing that I always strive for with AI is to get things as simple as possible while still getting decent results, finding that lowest denominator. Because I believe that is the direction that AI is trending. I think one of the reasons, if you look at images, for example, in Midjourney, one of the reasons that Midjourney has done so well is because of all the AI art generators out there, and there are so many of them, they have managed to make it so that it produces the best results with a minimal amount of hacking, or prompt engineering. All you have to do is put in a couple of prompts and it will get you something that's actually genuinely good. Whereas with some of the others, like Stable Diffusion, for example, you have to have like hundreds of words to really optimize the prompt, and it can, people have fun with that. And I think that that's, there's a place for that kind of prompt engineering where you're really getting complicated. But for me personally, I think AI is going in the direction where the AI that can do the best with the least amount of prompt engineering is going to be the one that comes out on top. And so far, when it comes to editing, none of the tools are doing that for me so far. But let's just get into a little bit of the techniques that Future Fiction Academy was doing, because they are kind of cool. I just think that we might be overcomplicating things when a more simple solution, a more human-based solution, might actually be a better option. But let's show what they did. So if we come into custom instructions here, we're going to give some instructions on how we want ChatGPT to respond. And we're actually going to give it 2 personas here. Now, in the Future Fiction Academy video, they are doing this in the OpenAI playground. And you can certainly do it there. And actually, Future Fiction Academy does a lot of work in the playground. I prefer to keep things in ChatGPT, again, because I think it keeps things simpler. And because I think this is where most people are when they're coming at AI. They know what ChatGPT is. They've maybe used ChatGPT. And so I tend to spend a lot of my time in ChatGPT for that reason. But we're going to give this 2 personas. We're going to say one is going to be named Bob, and the other one is going to be named Harry. And we say Bob looks for inconsistencies throughout a work of fiction. He is a editor for best-selling fiction that has been working at huge publishers for over 30 years. He has a keen eye for scene structure, character development, and dialogue. All right, so we're giving it stuff here, and you can really go to town, add as many things as you wanted to Bob, as long as it'll fit within the 1,500 characters that you're allowed. The only thing I'm going to add here is Bob does not change any of the text that he is given to critique. Instead, he just makes comments on the text and suggestions on how to improve. All right. Harry, on the other hand, we're going to give a different persona. Harry is a master reviser and is really good at taking the critiques given by Bob and actually applying those critiques to the original text. He makes the text flow seamlessly with the new edits. Overall, makes the text shine. So now we have these 2 personas. I'm just going to save this, and we're going to take the same text that we had here from the beginning, but instead of saying, please critique the following, we say, please critique the following as Bob. Okay? Now, as Bob, it's going to give us the critique based on the persona that we gave it. And already it's given me a couple of things that are actually better than the results that we were getting before. Like, for instance, here, this inconsistency in world building. It says, you mentioned that Lyra is a 4th year and has been practicing for years. Yes, she's raising the dead for the first time. This raises the question about the academic process at Bright Soul Academy. Some elaborate or brief explanation could help resolve this. So this is a good example of a valid critique, and there are more of these in here, which just goes to show you that there are improvements that you can make to your prompt that will increase the value of the editing that it gives you. However, I still find a lot of the same problems with this as I found with the previous iteration. Like, for instance, this says, the dialogue is good, but the accompanying actions and tags could be used more effectively to show emotions or add subtext. For instance, when Lyra finally admits her anxiety about raising the dead, you could show Alara's reaction in a way that makes her seem more compassionate or understanding. See, that to me, having written what I did, just sounds like it's just trying to come up with something, and it sounds very much like fluff, like it's just padding out the thing here. And so this is okay. And now we could just say, be Harry. No, hopefully it will actually take those criticisms and actually start rewriting. And yes, that's exactly what it's doing here. So it did manage to fix some things. It no longer has that type of prestige or prestigious. Just changed it to necromancy holds immense prestige. But overall, there isn't much difference about this. And I will say, this actually does read a little bit better. The problem is, this is creating a lot of extra work. And maybe it's just because editing is not my favorite part of the process, other than, editing the AI output. I do enjoy that. But personally, this just adds another step for me. And this brings me to the other sort of major issue with using AI to edit, and that is you really can't edit large chunks at a time. If I could put my entire chapter into here and have it accurately make these changes and actually improve the writing, then I might be okay with it, but I can't really do that. I've only got a couple hundred words here that I'm editing, and it does okay with that, but it's not going to be able to give you any significant structural information because you can only put in small chunks at a time. You can maybe get a little bit better with Claude, but with Claude, I find that these issues of just sort of telling you what you want to hear tend to be more magnified. And so these are the problems that I run into, and I just haven't really found a good solution for this. Which is why my recommendation is to keep the editing as a mostly human thing that you do. It should be a human step. Think of yourself as an editor of a ghost written manuscript. And you need to go through and make sure it's okay. This is something you should be doing anyway. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a book that hasn't really been fully reviewed, and you're not going to understand whether it did a good job or not. So you're doing this anyway. I would highly recommend that you just continue editing the way you would normally edit. And none of these tools in their current capacity, and probably not for many, many years, will ever be able to compete with an actual human editor that you pay to edit your work for you. That said, there are a few tools that you can use that can make this a little bit better. The first is Sudowrite. So when I'm editing, I love to go into Sudowrite because this is kind of how Sudowrite started, was as an AI editing tool. This isn't analyzing your text and giving you suggestions on what to change. You still need to do that part yourself. But it is taking what you give it and then using AI helps to fix the problem. So, for example, I have a really hard time with descriptions in the books that I write. I tend to gloss over them. I tend to just skip to the action and the dialogue and things like that. And so a lot of times when people beta read my books and give me feedback, a lot of it's just like, I didn't really understand what was going on in the location that we were in. Like, where are the people? Are they over here? Are they over there? Like, what's it look like? All this stuff. And so if I wanted to work with that, I could just come into here into Sudowrite and say, so I was sitting in the mess hall with Alara. Let's say I just want to improve the description here. I hit describe. And based on some settings that I had already set here, it's going to give me information here for all 5 senses. And here we go for sight. It was a long wooden table with half a dozen wooden benches on each side of the table. The mess hall was dimly lit with the light of the setting sun. It gives me a whole bunch of descriptive information based on sight, which is probably the most descriptive one here. And then I can also look at smell. The smell of the mess hall was a mix of different foods, from mutton to venison to pork and bread. Gives you for taste, the stew was hot with meat and vegetables. Sound, the light clank of silverware against the table. And it gives you all these suggestions, and then you pick and choose what you want to put in here, and now you have a much more vivid description of the mess hall. But you see how this is different, right? This is where you are making the choice to make an edit yourself, and then using AI to help you with that edit. And Sudowrite is really good at those really substantive edits where you have to add a lot of information, a lot of description, a lot of dialogue, rephrasing things to be less awkward, all of that stuff. But you are still reading through it and identifying the problem areas yourself. So let me show off a few more of these tools. One of my favorites is Show Don't Tell, which you can do with this rewrite feature. So if you select at least 10 words, you can hit rewrite, come over here to rephrase. And then there are various options for how you want to rephrase it. You can make it shorter, you can make it more descriptive, you can use show not tell, give it more inner conflict, make it more intense. I'm going to select show not tell because this is what I use the most here in these situations, and hit go. And it gives us a couple of different options here. I like this one. She stared at Lyra, worry creasing her bowl of boiled potatoes set in front of the girl, only a few morsels missing from it. What's wrong, sweetheart? You've hardly touched your food. So not exactly what I am talking about in this particular scene, but it does give it is more showy, more telly. And you could obviously, if this isn't what you want, you could have a go again. Let's see what it would look like if we wanted to make it more intense. And now we have a little bit here. It seems to think that this is her mother talking to her because it isn't reading the context around it. So I might want to actually select a little bit more here. But it says the worry etched into her face was unmistakable as she implored, yada, yada, yada. So these are really good editing tools, but they're still going to require a lot of human guidance, which is what I think you need to be doing with editing in general. Another thing we could do is hit this expand feature. We hit expand. Now from this quick little sentence here, it's now given us a much, much larger section of text. And this is really good if you've got a section that's really kind of vague and brief and you need it to be more in depth. This is a great way to edit that quickly, and so on and so forth. Now the other tool that is really good for writing, which is an AI tool, is ProWritingAid. And I have links, by the way, to both Sudowrite and ProWritingAid below. They are affiliate links, but I only link to affiliate links that I actively use and recommend for that purpose. ProWritingAid is an editing tool. It doesn't have quite the same type of features as Sudowrite, but it does allow us to identify things such as sentence structure issues and grammar and spelling issues, all of the kind of things that you might normally want to take out in a line edit or a proofread. And it's really good at identifying those things and marking them for you. So for instance, if we come here into Atticus where I was writing this material, you'll notice all of these underlines here. It's giving me suggestions on what to do for each of those. So in this case, it says, consider simplifying this very complex sentence. It's saying it's a very complex sentence. I agree, it is. And so I could just rewrite it myself, or I could actually say, suggest rephrases. And it gives me a couple of different options for much more simplified rephrases. Now, this actually is a generative AI feature here, the rephrase feature, but it is one of the only generative AI features that we have here. However, this is an AI tool. It uses AI to identify a lot of the issues here. But you notice like here, for example, it did identify this typo with prestigious. It's also identifying Eben Reach, which is a name, as a misspell. And so if it's inaccurate, you can say add to dictionary. We could also just say ignore, and then it'll ignore that from now on. Ember Feng is another one. I'll just say ignore. Bright Soul Academy, ignore. And now it should have a better understanding of what I'm doing there. Prestigious, we can correct it to the correct spelling there. Here's another one here where it says instead of a comma, this should probably be a period. I think that's probably fine. Here's an interesting one that it tells me. It says end dashes should never have a space on either side. So we can fix that. And so you'll actually go through and learn a lot about the sentence structure and things, and which is one of the marks of a really good program, is one that will actually teach you and help you figure out what is good or better grammatical or sentence structure, stuff like that. So I highly recommend this tool, ProWritingAid. It's very similar to Grammarly, which you probably have heard, but it tends to be better for long form documents overall. Here's another good example here where it caught passive voice. These are all color coded too, by the way, and you can select which ones you want it to mention or not. So if you didn't really want to know about passive voice, you could have it set so it didn't do that. So it doesn't do that. But it gives you a bunch of different options there for ways to rephrase that. So overall, really useful tool. So those are my thoughts on editing with AI. I actually don't think that editing with AI is very effective for the time that it takes to do it well, especially if you're using tools like ChatGPT, Claude, etc. However, if you are doing the actual analysis part and you're going through and making your changes, then doing it here in Sudowrite can be one way to do the more substantive changes, and then taking that into ProWriting Aid and doing a lot more of the nitty-gritty details is a good way to go about it, in my opinion. But overall, I don't think anything, for a while at least, will ever be able to replace an actual quality human editor. But if you can't afford a human editor right now, using a combination of Sudowrite and ProWriting Aid is probably the way to go. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.